This little teaser image from Dusk Till Dawn, we assume at least, has all of us Warrior fanboys abuzz. Like Dorinthea, like Kassai even. The latter now seems unlikely, but on the other hand, that certainly does look like her sash, so you never know. But regardless, I believe the Warrior class is well positioned for a breakout. All they need is a handful of tools, pun absolutely intended. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, Flesh and Blood folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. Thanks for checking in. Once again, tonight I'm talking my favorite class, the Warriors, and why I think the Warrior class at large is poised for a potential breakout come Dusk Till Dawn. I know all of the kids are excited about a new Prism, a new Chane, and all of that. But I want to talk Warrior out of this set, or maybe into the future, to be fair. But I want to explain why I think Warrior is posed for a breakout. And yes, of course, much of this is inspired by this image right here of calling Birmingham, and there's a lot of debate to be had. Is it Dorinthea? Is it Kassai? It's probably Dorinthea because the lore has her being light and all that, but the whole sash thing's pretty much Kassai, right? So it is a very interesting little discussion to be had. But aside from that, let's take it down so we don't detract from the point of the evening, talking about why the Warrior class posed for a breakout. And yes, we're doing this PTI style. So the way we're going to do this tonight, or the way I am going to do this tonight, and I want to do it tonight, is I want to kind of walk through the challenges that Warrior has, that I believe Warrior has right now. And then we're going to the springboard section there below as to why I think Warrior is posed for that breakout, kind of addressing the challenges I see above. Now, kind of the overall statement for the barriers and challenges for Warrior, I think, is actually the fact that I believe Warrior is a class that the designers at LSS are scared of. And that's because it's kind of, to a certain extent, the Ranger thing. And I know that's a sensitive word because Ranger's really good right now, but they're busted or they're bad. And I kind of, Warrior's not bad, to be very clear here, right? And I obviously see Kassai on there, right? She's not bad at all. But one of the things holding Warriors back is the fact that, if they get some more, they could potentially be really, really, really gross. So to that end, I wanted to talk both Kassai and to a lesser extent, Prodigy. Now, these are both Blitz heroes, which is kind of almost a self-answering question, because both of them, we've talked about it before many times on this channel, that even I play Kassai, she's my primary player, she's my primary hero in Blitz. No secret there. I think Kassai's borderline busted, right? That second swing coming for free is pretty disgusting, and her ultimate is super disgusting. And it's fine in Blitz. It's totally fine in Blitz. And it works in Blitz. But if we were to, again, we've talked about it before, if we were to extend Kassai to CC, that'd be pretty gross, right? Being able to Blade Runner and hit and run and have 12 copies total and just keep coming with the 2-card hand, that's gross, right? 2-card hand with yellow pitch or a blue for 1 float to take it. Yeah, you get the point. You get the point. And Prodigy, I think, to a lesser extent, but Prodigy Dorinthea, I think, is kind of the same angle where you have these guaranteed second swings is a very scary prospect. And I believe that the designers are scared of that. And to my point, let's go ahead and talk about OG Dorinthea. Well, not Prodigy Dorinthea, but real Dorinthea, CC Dorinthea. And the reason you'll see I have the Merciless Battle Axe up here. The Merciless Battle Axe is awful. I did a whole video about it. It's offensively bad, right? For it to have been the Marvel from that set. And it's very clear to me, as someone who's done playtesting, and to be clear, I'm not saying I playtested Fab, I'm not saying I'm smart enough to do that. It's not what I'm saying. But as someone who's done playtesting in the past, this card screams to me as something like they had designed, it was in the set, and they're just like, okay, it's too good, let's just make it bad, and then they forgot about it. Because this card is, like I said, almost offensively bad. And the reason, I believe, and what's holding a lot of, I think, the design, quote, scare or so around Warrior is Dorinthea herself. Because let's say in Crazy Town, they made Merciless Battle Axe a 2/4. That would not have, but it would, like, under normal stream, you'd be like, oh, 2/4 seems fine. Well, not with Dorinthea. And I think that's kind of my point, is I think a lot of what's holding them back, even from the design standpoint, is like the concept of a good weapon coming in twice, regardless of counter threat and all that, I think is a big, like, that's scary, right? You front pump, do that, somehow give it go again. It's a scary prospect. And obviously the boots are a common, so it's just like ubiquitous with Warrior if they need it to be. So I think that's a scary concept. And again, that's why I put the Merciless Battle Axe on here, is I believe that that's ultimately why Merciless Battle Axe is just so offensively bad, was they were scared to make it better because they didn't want it coming in twice. And to be clear, I'm not really sure how this would have come in twice, but if it was a different version, you can at least see how that would have gotten there. Now, the next part of this is the challenge is reprise and on hits. You're like, but Andrew, reprise is really good. And I challenge that. I actually don't think reprise is that good anymore. You're like, but Dorinthea used to kill people. She was crazy. And early on, when people don't know how to block, reprise is really good. Well, yes. And so I'm going to one-up you there on hits. And as this, I mean, it's very, very, very clear that as this game has continued to evolve, the value of on hits has increased in value. On hits have increased in value because people have learned that by not blocking, in most cases, by not blocking, you can just do more damage than if you blocked. Right? A card blocks for 2 or 3, and a lot of them can like synergize for 5 or 6 or more. So on hits are the way to force people to block. And that's where reprise, as its identity, reprise only gets you the additional value if you block, but it doesn't deliver an on hit. So it's almost like it was good early, but reprise now is actually a pretty bad keyword, all in all, right? You look at something like Iron Song Response, which is completely worthless except for the block without them blocking, and it delivers no on hit. And the logic there being, well, Dorinthea's Blade is an on hit in of itself. And I agree, I understand, and I acknowledge that. I'm not ignoring that at all. But if you really start to think about it in terms of like doing a race, it's not delivering an on hit with which to slow someone down. And if you look at who is good in the game right now, they are folks who can somehow throw up a barrier with which to keep their opponents down. That is a true statement, right? So, and in like Singing Steelblade, paying 1 for 1 is awful value. You're only going to use Singing Steelblade if you are getting a reprise effect. And if they're not blocking, you're getting 0 value out of that. And for those of you who may recall my list when I went to Worlds when Fi was big, I actually did not play Singing Steelblade when I went to Worlds because I was playing Hit and Run instead. Sorry, not Hit and Run. Run Through instead, because it just gave me better value in half of the matches that I had, which was Dromai and Fi. And I think that was a good meta call. So you see my point. Hopefully you see my point. And then the last item I have there on barriers and challenges, which is specifically relevant to Dusk Till, or at least in theory, specifically relevant to Dusk Till Dawn, is charging. Charging is bad. It is a bad mechanic, and it's another one of those mechanics that, because it's a storage mechanic, it's essentially a secondary storage mechanic because you can also store in your arsenal. That's actually very, very, very scary, right? You can charge up and just unleash on your opponent. And that's how Boltyn, when he does wins, is he stores up a bunch of stuff and it just goes crazy. And charging is really scary because of that. And I believe that's why charging in of itself sucks, right? I mean, for those of you who are Boltyn people and smashing the dislike button, I get it. I do. I really, really, really put a lot of effort into making Boltyn work. I really did. But charging overall is bad, and the data does not. The data supports that. The data does not argue with that, as I was going to say, right? So I'm not smashing your hero. I'm not saying you can't win with your hero, but what I'm saying is right now, currently, charging is not good. And to be honest, it's another one of those, and it's a general theme of this section, right? If charging was like more efficient, like if you had a card that was like charge and draw, that's probably too good. Right. And again, we talked about that in a video again. It's like, how can we make Boltyn better without breaking him? And I didn't really have an answer overall. And I think that's part of the inherent barriers and issues to wrap this section up. Now, let's go into the springboards, right? So I've been very negative on my favorite class here for a little bit, but the purpose of that wasn't to poop on warriors. It was to put in context of kind of the challenges that the design or whatever might face in making warriors better. Is that if you have a too efficient of a weapon, Dorinthea tears you up. If charging becomes too good, then it's broken. If Kassai or Prodigy or someone like them were to become a CC hero, the value of that is pretty crazy, right? Because on a weapon, the value of go again is roughly 2. And that's a true statement based on comparing a 1-for-3 weapon with Quicksilver Dagger, right? And that's actually not even completely true because Quicksilver Dagger had to have go again before. So maybe it's even a little more than that, right? But the going rate for a weapon swing with Warrior is 1-for-3 or on a 2-handed. And yes, okay, fair. That's a 1-handed. So maybe you call it 1 and change. That's fair. Let's call it 1 and change on Quicksilver Dagger. So it's 1 and a little plus 1 is the cost of go again on a weapon. We know that the cost of go again is roughly 1 on an action card. So that tracks because it should be a little more on a weapon. Anyway, let's move on. So the springboards, why I think Warriors poised to explode is basically Everfest. Everfest was everybody focused so much on Kassai in Everfest, which made complete sense because she got blood in her hands. She was very clearly the focus. But Everfest was a one-handed weapon S show. Great cards. Fantastic cards came out of that, right? Slice and Dice, Blade Runner, in the swing. Only one of those is rare, by the way. These cards are disgustingly good. You can very easily come up with 2... If you are able... For a 2-card hand, you're able to do disgusting things with Kassai. And with a 4-card hand, oh my God. Oh my God. So, to that point, aside from fanboying over Kassai here, dual-handed weapons is like if we get someone who can consistently somehow manage to make two one-handed weapons. You know what I mean. 2 one-handed weapons, hack, slash, whatever. We can figure out someone who can take advantage of doing that efficiently. And I know there are people out there screaming, it's like, well, but I do it with Dorinthea and then I get a 3rd swing. I get you, but you're paying a lot to do that. So what we need is somehow, not what we need, because I don't know to the above, I don't know that we do need that, quote unquote, because it might be busted. But if we can get someone who somehow facilitates second swings being easier, it'll probably be somewhere between a Dorinthea and a Kassai in terms of value, and by that I mean Prodigy and Kassai, slice somewhere in between there. That's really scary. Really scary. Because just the pure value of Slice and Dice and Blade Runners and In the Swings is pretty good. And then you add Hit and Run on top of that for the second swing, right? A +3 and go again, and then follow up with a 0-4, which opens up a whole nother can of worms. A lot of really cool stuff there. And, on top of that comes the front pumps. So let's go back to kind of my original statement around OG Thea. In fact, I'll back up to it. OG Thea and the Merciless Battle Axe. Warrior has some really good, decent, whatever, front pumps. Like Plow Through. Plow Through is a really cool card. Dauntless, this backdrop is a really cool card. Makes your next reaction cost 1, which Warriors don't hate that. It's pretty good. So if you can come up with something where like even it's a single swing warrior where they could potentially, it doesn't really work currently with the blades being 1 for 3, but if you could get a blade that's 2 for 4 and say you single swing, you just, for blue, you pump and swing for 7 with some sort of, it would imply that there's some sort of on hit or some sort of something that wants them to block. Because again, Warrior's problem to the above on my reprise and on hits is if you don't force them to block, they're not going to, because you can't outvalue, like dropping 2 cards to swing 7, that's not good unless you're making something happen, right? That the value's there, or the argument's there, and it's a 2 card, it's a 1 card permanent, but still it's like, then what are you going to do? You're going to be on a fatigue strategy and like 19 other heroes do it better. Feels like it right now anyway, right? So that kind of brings me to really my last 2 points, where Warrior's going to have to, what will make Warrior really explode, in my opinion, and still be balanced, all right, under that argument, is some sort of detrimental on hits. Because for the most part, Warrior's on hits right now are positive to the Warrior. And what I mean that is that they make the next swing stronger, or they somehow put a counter on, or something like that. You essentially, for a lack of a better term, you gain momentum by stabbing. That is really kind of the Warrior thing, and that's fine. But I think that with what is holding Warrior back, again, that, the top column there, I think, or the top group there, what is holding Warrior back is the lack of making people block, and then having a lot of their bonuses be relying on people to block. So Warrior doesn't even really become good until endgame, but Warrior can't get to endgame without slowing their opponent down, right? It's this cascade problem. I think that's the primary challenge overall that they face. So if Warrior is able to get some sort of, I'm not saying we need an Ice Warrior, it's not what I'm saying, wouldn't hurt, but I'm not saying we get an Ice Warrior or something like that, but something that forces your opponent to block. Heck, maybe if it's like a Pulse Wave Harpoon type thing, where it's like, if it's your second swing, pull a card out of their hand and make them block, and then it feeds your Iron Sight, something like that. Warrior would be in a really, really strong spot, and it would really be very archetype opening for a class that right now doesn't get their bonus unless people block, and there's nothing to make them block. And then last part of this is the weapon types. So we've already kind of really started exploring this with axes. Axes are just garbage right now. Again, I've talked about before how like Cleave is a crazy card, 1 for 4 on an axe. We get some, like maybe that's the way to explore this and keep it in check as Warrior grows, is say, you know what, there's a lot of stuff out there for swords. To be fair, most of Warrior stuff actually says weapon, so you have to be careful with that. But there's a lot of stuff out there with swords. There's some stuff out there with swords. But maybe you just take it, maybe that's the safe way to do it within the horizontal design space, is you just take it somewhere else and you're like, hey, Warriors use spears now, right? I don't know whether Dorinthea wants to spear or not, but you get the point, hopefully. Maybe that's the way to safely do it, is you get a 2 for 4 spear, and then it doesn't work with a certain subset of cards. Or again, maybe spear is not the right answer, but hopefully you understand what I'm driving at here, which is, as we go wider on weapon types, you can start to really, or maybe it's talents, whatever it may be, you can really start to slot in it. But you're not going to be able to control that, I think, in Dusk Till Dawn, because Dusk Till Dawn is very clearly going to be light or generic for Warriors. It would be really cool to get a Dark Warrior, I think, but isn't that a Runeblade for the most part, right? So anyway, I really think that if Warrior's able to get on hits, or, well, it's ultimately the on hits. They have to somehow be able to slow down their opponent, which is something that, if you look at who's good, Guardians, they can slow them down. Icelander, they can slow them down. Ranger delivers all crazy sorts of on hits, potentially anyway, or they can just race you. And right now, Warrior cannot race you at the same rate that anyone else can, and they don't apply on hits, and there's no reason to block. and so on and so on and so on. That's the warrior problem overall, right? Well, Ranger got really, really good with a couple little changes. I think Warrior could get pretty good with a couple of changes too. So anyway, if you made it to the end, I really thank you for listening to kind of my brain dump, really just kind of brainstorming on what's what I've been doing. I think, hey, Dusk Till Dawn, I think things could get pretty cray-cray, as the kids are saying these days, for the Warrior class. And I'm hoping it does, because I feel that Dorinthea like, there's a whole weird meta right now, and Dorinthea is not a part of it, and that's a bummer. Kassai does fine in Blitz, to be very clear, but again, I acquiesce. I think Kassai is broken, right? She would not work in CC. We all know it. So anyway, let me know what you think below, or if you're a Warrior player, if you're not. Even so, I think it's a good philosophical discussion of, can Warriors class identify with detrimental on hits, or does it have to be completely momentum, stab, rapier, whatever? I've played enough Soul Calibur games to keep pounding and gain momentum. I get it, but let me know what you're thinking. Thank you so much, folks, for joining. If nothing else, go Commando.